Hi, I'm Nat. I'm a theologian and I'm here today to tell you about the sandwich technique. So, what is the sandwich technique? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, you have a metaphor that is used on two ends of a story, like bread, and then what's in between is what you're meant to pay attention to. So I'm going to use the example of the fig tree in the Gospel of Matthew. So the fig tree is going to be our first piece of bread, and then there's going to be story as the meat or peanut butter, and then there's another fig tree, which is the second piece of bread that serves to tell us that what we just read, the story, since the last fig tree, is what's important. So Matthew 21 has the first mention of the fig tree. So let's drop this into context. At this point in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus and his disciples are traveling to Jerusalem in order to celebrate Passover. For the bit with the fig tree, they were near Jerusalem at the Mount of Olives by Bethphage, which is near, if you'll remember in my previous video, Bethany. Jerusalem is right here, and Bethphage and Bethany are right next to it. When Jesus finally got into Jerusalem, everyone there was like, hey, who is this guy? Why is everyone here so excited about him? And they were telling each other, he's a prophet, which we can take to mean essentially that he was teaching within the tradition. So when Jesus went back to Jerusalem again the next morning, it says that he was hungry and saw the fig tree by the side of the road, which unfortunately did not have any fruit. Now, this isn't a real fig tree. I mean, maybe it is, but it's also being used as a symbol. It's a parable in action, really, once we fit it into our sandwich. There's mention of the fig tree again in Matthew 24, and this time it's explicitly pointed to as symbolic. So, Jesus has just come out of the temple, where he was defending himself to the scribes and the Pharisees, defending basically his interpretation of the religious laws and how they should be practiced, legally and ethically. Jesus says that the fig tree had leaves, but it did not yet have fruit. And so this is Jesus making a direct metaphor out of two things that he had just experienced, and is our sign the story that happened between Matthew 21 and 24 is really crucial. It's a key element to the plot of this gospel. So Jesus is warning his disciples not to bow to false prophets, not to stand by when people desolate or sacrilege a holy place. He is emphasizing that although the scribes and Pharisees don't agree with him, he isn't actually trying to change anything about the faith itself. Then there are three parables condemning Jewish leadership, essentially for not realizing that the faith was about more than just the rituals associated with it. This is why Jesus was crucified. He was threatening the typical conceptions of Jewish worship practices, especially with regards to who was allowed to participate in those practices. So Jesus, and later Paul, was trying to change the who and the how of the rituals associated with Judaism. And the people in charge were like, no, you can't do that. This is how it's always been done for a reason, because this is what's been told to us by the prophets. So Jesus was like, okay, so then I'm a new prophet, because this is how we should be worshiping. And he was teaching people his way, and people liked it. It caused a huge stir when he came into the city for Passover. I would imagine that the Jewish leaders were very concerned that this was going to divide the faith. They were already not doing so hot under Roman rule. In Acts, they talk a lot about how Paul is continually thrown in prison for the good of the Jews, which basically means that he was stirring up a lot of trouble with the powers that be. In the temple, Jesus was accusing the Pharisees of swearing only to power. And they were saying, No, it's not the fact that we are sacrificing, it's the fact that we are sacrificing as part of an agreement with our God. So Jesus is arguing that God's going to be happy to see you if you come to God, no matter what you were like before. The important thing is that you came to God. But the scribes and the Pharisees were arguing that you can't actually come to God until you have fully engaged in all the rituals of Judaism. Which boils down to, you can't come to God unless you were born as a Jew. They didn't want Gentiles converting to Judaism. And so then, all of the controversy in Paul's letters centered around, what can we do to bring people who weren't born as Jews into Jewish tradition? They even ended up circumcising adults for a while. They were also wondering things like, are we allowed to eat the meat that's been served to idols? Or does that make God think that we're worshiping idols? After Jesus, the Christian Jews dealt largely with answering all of these really nitty-gritty questions about how they were allowed to integrate themselves into the Jewish faith. Unfortunately, by doing so, it actually caused a schism, and so we got Christianity as a separate religion from Judaism, once it formed its own doctrine. So that was a lot, which is why it was contained within the sandwich technique, so that you know when you hit the second piece of bread, the second instance of the fig tree, that what you just read was the peanut butter of the story. If you'd like to hear more, please subscribe, share with your friends, and check out the link in the description for the cause that Editing Nat has decided to support this week. It's my birthday, so this would be a really great way to give me a gift.